I found it by accident. A small black device, magnetized and tucked neatly near the rear axle. It didn't look damaged or weather-just, intentional. Something meant to be hidden, but not forever. I stood there for a while, not moving, not touching it. The only sound was the hum of the engine cooling behind me. There wasn't any rage. No immediate wave of betrayal or panic, just a quiet, cold realization. Someone I trusted wanted to know where I was without asking. I didn't take it out. I closed the trunk like nothing had happened, got back behind the wheel, and drove off. There are moments in life where a confrontation feels too small for what's been broken. This was one of them. If she wanted to track me, fine, I'd let her. But I wasn't going to wait around wondering why. I was going to find out for myself. My name's Evan. I'm 41. A senior project manager at a mid-sized tech firm on the east side of town. I've been in that role for close to 7 years, now long enough to know what I'm doing, but not long enough to be jaded. I don't skip meetings, I don't leave tasks half-done, and I don't bring chaos into places that run better without it. My life has always been built on structure. I wake up at 6:30, take the same route to the office, and meal prep on Sundays so I don't have to think about what I'm eating during the week. It's not flashy, but it works. And for most of my marriage, that consistency was something Julia said she appreciated. We've been married 10 years. No kids by mutual agreement. We talked about it early on and decided our careers and lifestyle were enough. She's a marketing consultant with her own client base, mostly remote, which meant she was home more than I was. That never bothered me. We each had our own lanes. Friday nights were grocery runs. Saturdays were laundry and slow mornings. If I stayed late at the office, I'd always send a quick text. Never once disappeared without saying where I was going. I didn't give her surprises, but I didn't give her reasons to worry either. Over time, though, I started noticing shifts. Not in anything loud, just quiet withdrawals. She'd stop making eye contact during dinner. She spent more time on her phone, smiling at conversations I wasn't part of. If I asked about her day, I got short, distracted answers. I didn't push. I gave her space, like I always had. But looking back now, I realize that sometimes silence isn't peace, it's distance wearing a familiar face. Once I knew about the tracker, everything shifted. Not externally, I still made breakfast the same way, left for work on time, answered her texts like always. But my mind was replaying every moment from the past 6 months under a different filter. Little things began resurfacing. Times, she'd asked, "Did you stop anywhere after work?" In a tone too casual, like the answer didn't matter, but the timing always followed days when I'd taken a detour, or when she'd mentioned my location before I had a chance to say anything, brushing it off with a half laugh. "Oh, I figured you were still near the office." That wasn't intuition. It was confirmation bias. There was one specific day I hadn't thought much of until now 3 months back. She offered to take my car in for a full detailing. She said it was a surprise, that she noticed the pollen buildup on the hood and thought I'd appreciate it. I remember thanking her, not thinking twice, but she had the car for hours while I was in back-to-back calls. That's probably when she planted it. What sticks with me most isn't the deception, it's how ordinary. The deception looked, how easily it slid into routine without raising alarms. That's what made it effective. We'd always had a low-conflict relationship. Neither of us yelled or argued. If anything, we over-communicated, especially in the first few years. I used to think that was a sign of maturity to people who didn't need drama to connect. Now I wonder if it just meant we got good at hiding things we didn't want to confront. The betrayal didn't show up like a wrecking ball. It crept in through questions that weren't really questions. One night, as we were finishing dinner, she said, "You've been driving a lot lately." Her tone was light, playful, but something about it felt deliberate. That was the moment it all crystallized. She wasn't guessing where I was going. She knew. And instead of confessing or questioning me, she played the long game, built a performance around my movements, made me feel like everything was still fine. That's what surveillance does. It lets you pretend things are normal while holding every secret behind a glass wall. What I felt then wasn't anger, it was erasure. I'd spent a decade being reliable, showing up, explaining my actions, being consistent to a fault. And she met that effort with hidden tech and vague insinuations. This wasn't about suspicion. This was about control. The shift in our relationship was complete. She'd stopped treating me like a partner and started treating me like a subject. And if she was watching me that closely, I had to ask, what exactly was she trying to distract me from? That's when I stopped being the one under the microscope and started becoming the one behind the lens. I left the tracker right where it was. Every part of me wanted to rip it out, confront her, demand an explanation, but I didn't, because by then, I understood something deeper. Whatever she was doing, she was hoping I wouldn't notice. And silence, when used right, is its own form of control, so I gave her what she wanted, routine. I kept every movement predictable on the outside, same office hours, same grocery store, same quiet evenings, but beneath that, I started watching her closely. One afternoon, I told her I'd be heading to the hardware store across town. Instead, I drove to a park near my old college somewhere, completely off route. That evening, she casually said, "So? No luck finding parking by the lake, huh?" I hadn't mentioned the lake. It confirmed what I suspected. She was actively monitoring my movements, reading locations, not waiting for me to share them. But she wasn't as composed as she thought. Her own habits began to change. She started keeping her laptop closed when I walked into the room, resting her phone face down even when it wasn't ringing. She flinched just slightly whenever I asked where she'd been that day. Her stories came too quickly, like they'd been rehearsed. What really stood out was her increasing nervousness. She wasn't calm. She was covering. That's when I stopped asking what she was trying to catch me doing, and started asking what she was trying to hide. It didn't feel like paranoia. It felt like proof building slowly, disguised as normalcy. She thought she had the upper hand, thought I was unaware, unbothered. But every question she asked only narrowed the distance between us. Not in closeness, in clarity. And the longer I played along, the more obvious it became. The tracker wasn't a tool for protection. It was her attempt to stay one step ahead of the guilt she wasn't ready to admit. Once I accepted that something was being hidden from me, I started documenting everything, not out of obsession, but precision. I'd spent years managing technical projects, tracking every milestone, every dependency, every delay. Now, I applied that same skill set to something far more personal. First came the pings. The tracker's signal logged locations every time the car moved. It wasn't difficult to intercept. I simply installed a parallel app designed for developers to monitor device behaviors. Each route, stop, and start time was captured in a neat timeline. I printed them, highlighted the timestamps, and started comparing them with conversations I'd had with Julia. She'd say, "I thought you were staying in that part of town longer," or "You got back quicker than usual." Subtle comments. But they lined up with days when I'd taken unplanned turns or paused at coffee shops without mentioning it. She wasn't making guesses, she was confirming reports. It didn't stop there. Asterisk, I reviewed our joint credit card statement, something I hadn't looked at closely in months. On a hunch, I filtered for weekday charges in areas we didn't normally visit. That's when I found Tab at a boutique hotel bar 2 towns over. Wine and appetizers, mid-afternoon. The charge landed the same day she told me she'd been at a client's office for an all-day strategy session. I checked the GPS history from her car, something we'd never disabled when we bought the newer model 2 years ago. It showed she'd parked near that hotel twice in the past 6 weeks. Both days were listed in her calendar as yoga workshops. I didn't say anything. I just marked the dates. Around that time, I added a backup camera to my car, not for reversing. It was angled toward the cabin, triggered automatically when the engine turned on. I set it to overwrite every 72 hours and quietly pulled footage every week, just in case. The final piece came from someone I trusted, Darren, a friend from work who handled security audits. I didn't give him details. Just asked if he could look into metadata linked to an unknown tracking app and confirm the account origin. 2 days later, he messaged me. The account's registered to a Gmail address with your wife's name in it. Same IP address as your home Wi-Fi. She's logging in almost every day. There it was. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a timeline, a pattern. A digital trail stitched together by repetition and carelessness. She wasn't just tracking me. She was doing it while building something on the side, and needed to know exactly how much time she had. Every detail she logged was a way to stay one step ahead of her own guilt. If I ever questioned her, she could spin it, control it, deny it. Surveillance gave her the confidence to continue whatever she was doing without the fear of being surprised. But what she didn't account for, what most people forget when they manipulate quietly, is that once you've taught someone how you move, you also teach them how to move undetected. I knew where she went, I knew when she lied, and now, I knew why. The goal had never been to punish her. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted truth, not for closure, but because I couldn't keep pretending that a quiet betrayal was less real than a loud one. At some point, the facts stopped being about suspicion. They become a mirror. And the picture I saw was one I couldn't ignore anymore. Once everything, aligned location data, financial records, login timestamps, stopped looking for more. I had enough. Not for drama, not to confront her across the dinner table, but to move. Quietly, deliberately, and without emotion, clouding the steps ahead. The first thing I did was open a new bank account in my name only. Nothing flashy, just a clean separation point. I began redirecting small portions of my direct deposit, enough to go unnoticed. I didn't drain anything. I just stopped mixing futures with someone who was clearly rewriting hers. Then came the documentation. I made digital and printed copies of everything. The hotel charges, the backup camera footage, the GPS logs, and the email activity showing her logging into the tracking account. Each item was dated, sorted, and backed up 3 times. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity that would stand on paper if it ever had to. After that, I booked a consultation with a divorce attorney. I walked in with a file folder and a calm explanation. No theatrics, no resentment, just facts. The attorney skimmed through my notes, asked a few questions, and nodded slowly. "You've done this the smart way," she said. "Keep documenting. Don't tip your hand yet. Let her think she still has control." That part was the hardest. Pretending nothing had changed. At home, Julia still kissed me goodnight and asked if I wanted anything from the store. Her performance hadn't slipped, but her distance had solidified. She was careful with her phone, polite in her questions, and always a beat too quick with answers. But she had no idea I already knew the shape of her other life. There was no point in anger. By then, the sadness had settled into something firmer. It's strange, the way betrayal doesn't always trigger rage. Sometimes it sharpens your instincts instead. You start measuring moments differently, less emotionally, more strategically. I wasn't preparing to punish her. I was preparing to reclaim my life before the damage hardened into permanence. There were no threats, no ultimatums. Just a plan built on the same quiet discipline I'd brought to everything else in my life. Structure, logic, timing. If she wanted to live behind a wall of secrets, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to keep building a future with someone who couldn't look me in the eye without checking a tracking app first, and when the time came to end it, she wasn't going to see it coming. It was a quiet Saturday morning mid-April, unremarkable in every other way. We'd both been home since the night before, barely speaking but pretending we weren't noticing the distance. Julia was scrolling through her tablet at the kitchen island while I made coffee. It was the kind of silence couples mistake for normal after too many years, but I'd been waiting for this morning. I asked her if we could sit for a minute. Nothing formal, no tone, just a calm request. She glanced up, mildly curious, not alarmed. "Sure," she said, pushing her tablet aside. "What's up?" I sat across from her and placed the manila folder on the table. She looked at it, then at me. Still no alarm. Maybe she thought it was something to do with taxes or scheduling. She reached for it slowly. Inside, printed copies of the GPS logs, bank statements, her car's location history, login records tied to the tracking app, and screenshots of the credit card charges from the hotel bar. I'd even included a few screen captures from the dashboard camera footage. Her car parked in the hotel lot on 2 separate weekday afternoons. She froze halfway. Through the second page, her eyes didn't rise, her lips parted, but nothing came out. That pause was everything. You were tracking me. I said, not a question, just a fact. Her face went pale, the kind of pale that doesn't come from illness but from exposure. She finally looked up. It wasn't what you think, she began, voice strained. I thought maybe something was going on. You were acting different. You were quiet. I just wanted to be sure. There was a slight tremor in her voice, like she was struggling to choose between honesty and damage control. She chose the latter. I was trying to protect us. I thought if I just knew, if I had some proof, I wouldn't have to guess anymore. It wasn't about control, it was about clarity. That word, clarity, hung in the air like a misplaced apology. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse her of lying, though I could have. I just let the silence stretch long enough for her to feel what it was like not to be in control of the room. Then I said it. I wasn't hiding anything, but you were. Her mouth opened again, but no sound followed. Her body leaned forward slightly, like she wanted to reach for an explanation, something to justify what she'd done. But there was no version of that story where it sounded reasonable. Not anymore. I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out the final page, the signed divorce petition. No dramatics, just ink on paper. She stared at it, like it was written in a language she hadn't learned. I already filed, I said. This is just the final copy for you to review. I won't fight over assets. I don't want the car, I just want it done. Hands were clenched now, knuckles tight around the edge of the table. Wait, Evan, we can talk about this. Please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought something was wrong. I stood up slowly, pushed the folder toward her. Something was wrong, but it wasn't me. No shouting, no dramatics, just a quiet exit. I walked out of the kitchen and left her sitting there, no defenses, no stories left to spin. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like distance, it felt like freedom. 6 months later, life is quieter and in many ways, better. I live in a small apartment downtown now. 2 rooms, nothing fancy, but there's a kind of stillness here I hadn't realized I was missing. No low-level tension. No second-guessing my own schedule. No glances over my shoulder, wondering what's being tracked, measured, or silently judged. Just space. My own space. The divorce went through without much resistance. Julia didn't contest anything. She signed the papers, returned the keys, and tried, at least at first, to maintain her image with mutual friends. The story she told was vague, something about drifting apart, miscommunication, different goals, but people ask questions, and documents have a way of surfacing when enough people start comparing timelines. The truth filtered out, piece by piece. I didn't spread it. I didn't need to, but it got around. The tracker, the hotel, the carefully managed lies. Eventually, the sympathy she tried to secure gave way to distance. Not dramatic fallout, just phone calls that weren't returned. Plans that stopped including her. She lost more than the marriage. She lost credibility, trust, the quiet respect people extend when they think you're still capable of self-awareness. As for me, I didn't walk away with anger. I walked away with clarity. People assume betrayal comes crashing in, but that's not how it works. Not always. Sometimes it arrives disguised as routine. It hides behind errands and dinner plans and just checking in. You don't notice it at first. You just feel off, like something underneath your day-to-day has stopped making sense. But you can't name it yet. What Julia did wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. And deliberate choices, no matter how softly made, leave loud consequences. The hardest part wasn't the infidelity or the lies, it was realizing that the trust I'd invested so steadily over 10 years had been returned. With suspicion that I'd spent years giving her space, and she used that space to monitor me. I never wanted to monitor anyone. I never even thought about control. All I ever wanted was honesty, in the end. It took a hidden tracker to show me the most honest thing she'd ever done because she never meant for me to see it. That tiny device, buried out of sight, said more than any of her explanations ever could. And if there's a takeaway here, it's this. Sometimes, the person watching you the closest is the one who's hiding the most. And when you finally stop explaining yourself to people who never deserved your trust, life starts to feel a lot more like your own. If you've ever experienced something similar, or trusted someone who quietly crossed a line, I hope you know you're not alone. Feel free to share your story in the comments.